The Galactic Empire had 3 rules about Dustreach. Never speak its name in official records, never send ships within 40 light-years of its orbit, and never, under any circumstance, let a human ask about the mine. For 50 years, those rules held. For 50 years, the colony rotted in silence, and the galaxy moved on, until a retired human marshal, drinking alone in a saloon on the outer rim, opened a letter that should not have existed, and read a name that the Empire had spent half a century trying to erase. His own. Elias Kane was 68 years old, and he had spent the last 23 years of his life perfecting the art of being forgotten. He lived on Tannervale, a failed mining colony in the outer rim that most star charts no longer bothered to mark. The planet had 2 suns, and both of them looked tired. So did Elias. Every morning he rose at the same hour, brewed the same black coffee, and stood by the same cracked window, watching the same red desert stretch to the horizon. In the afternoon, he worked in his garage, tinkering with a hoverbike he had been rebuilding for 20 years, not because he wanted to finish it, but because he didn't. In the evenings, he went to the Crooked Star. The saloon sat at the edge of town, its neon sign half dead, its wooden porch buckled by decades of desert wind. Elias took the same corner table. He ordered the same whiskey. The owner, a quiet woman named Marla Vance, rarely spoke to him. She poured his drink, nodded once, and left him to his silence. In 23 years, they had exchanged perhaps 200 words. That was how Elias liked it. The night it all began was a cold Tuesday in the month the locals called Ashfall, when the red dust came down from the upper atmosphere and settled on everything like the ashes of an old fire. Elias was halfway through his second whiskey when the saloon door opened. He did not look up. He heard the footsteps, measured, precise, the walk of a man who had once worn a uniform. It was the kind of step Elias himself had walked, a long time ago. The stranger crossed the floor without a word and sat down across from him. Elias took a slow sip of his drink. "What do you want?" he said. Not a question, a warning. The stranger said nothing. Instead, he reached into the inside pocket of his dust-stained coat and pulled out an envelope. He placed it on the table between them, pushed it forward with 2 fingers, and then stood up. The envelope was old. The paper had yellowed, the corners curled with age. There was no address, no name, only a red wax seal. And on that seal, pressed into the hardened wax, was a symbol Elias had not seen in 30 years. The old sigil of the Galactic Marshal Service. Not the new one, the old one, the one from before the Empire rewrote everything. Elias set his glass down very carefully. "Where did you get this?" he said. But the stranger was already walking away. He reached the door, paused, and tipped his hat. Once, briefly, the old marshal's salute, and then he was gone, swallowed by the ashfall wind. Every head in the Crooked Star turned to watch him leave. Nobody spoke. Marla Vance, behind the bar, gripped the edge of the counter so hard her knuckles went white. Elias stared at the envelope for 10 minutes before he touched it. When he finally opened it, a single sheet of paper fell out, 4 lines, written in a hand he had not seen in 20 years. Marshal Kane, Dust Reach needs you. The mine is open. Coal is still down there. Elias's hands did not shake. That would have required him to feel old. And for the first time in a very long time, he did not feel old at all. Cole Rennick had been dead for 20 years. Elias knew this because he had been there, because he had dug the grave with his own hands in the red dust of Dustreach, because there had been no one else left alive to do it, because he had carved the name into the stone with the tip of his own knife. But the letter was not lying, because at the bottom of the page, beneath those 4 impossible lines, was a single signature. It was Cole Rennick's. Elias did not sleep that night. He went home through the red wind, locked the door behind him, and pulled a wooden box out from under his bed. It had been there for 23 years. He had not opened it once in all that time. Inside the box was a badge. It was the old kind, heavy, hand-forged, made of a metal the Empire no longer mined. The surface was dulled by years of neglect, but the shape was unmistakable. A 5-pointed star inside a ring with a single word engraved along the bottom edge. Marshal. Beside it lay a revolver with a bone-handled grip and a faded photograph of 2 young men standing in front of a mine entrance, squinting at the sun. One of them was Elias. The other was Cole. Elias picked up the badge. He turned it over in his hand, and then the badge began to hum, a low, almost imperceptible vibration, as if something inside the metal had woken up. Elias had not powered the badge in 23 years. It had no battery. It had no signal receiver. It should not have been capable of making any sound at all. But it was humming. And then, slowly, across the dulled surface of the star, 3 words began to appear, not printed, not etched, but burned through from the inside, glowing faintly red as if the metal itself was being branded from within. They found it. Elias sat down on the edge of the bed. The room was cold. His breath came slow. He had spent 23 years telling himself that Dustreach was a closed chapter, that what he and Cole had found down in that mine had been buried, along with everyone who ever knew about it. The Empire had seen to that. 3 weeks after the incident, a Black Fleet corvette had landed in Dustreach, and every surviving colonist had been relocated, their memories scrubbed, their records sealed, their names erased from the Galactic Registry. Elias himself had been given a choice: silence or the same treatment. He had chosen silence, but now the badge was burning, and somewhere, across 40 light-years of black space, something in the mine at Dust Reach was awake again. Elias pulled the old revolver from the box, checked the cylinder. 6 rounds. Original issue. Never fired. He loaded the belt, strapped it on, and walked out to the garage. The hoverbike he had spent 20 years not finishing sat under a canvas tarp. He pulled the tarp off, looked at it, and then, for the first time since Cole Rennick's death, Elias Kane finished something. By sunrise, the bike was running. The Tannervale spaceport was a small thing. A single landing pad, a fuel station, and a customs shack manned by a bored Krellin named Vess. When Elias pulled up on his hoverbike with a travel bag slung over his shoulder, Vess looked up from his data slate with mild surprise. "Going somewhere, old man?" "Need a ship," Elias said. "Cargo class, short range, something that won't ask questions." Vess raised a scaled brow. "Where to?" Elias did not answer right away. He reached into his coat and set a small flat object on the counter. It was a credit chip, old currency, pre-Empire, the kind nobody used anymore. Vess stared at it, then at Elias, then at the chip again. "That's a lot of money," Vess said, quietly. "It's enough," Elias said. "I need a ship, and I need you to forget I was ever here." Vess looked down at the chip for a long moment. Then he reached under the counter and pulled out a key. "Pad 3. She's old, but she flies. Don't come back." "I won't." Elias walked out into the morning light. The wind had died. The 2 tired suns were rising together over the red horizon, and for a moment, just a moment, he stopped and looked at them. He had not planned to leave Tannervale. He had planned to die here, quietly, in the same chair he had sat in for 23 years. That had been the deal he had made with himself. But deals, Elias knew, were only worth the silence behind them. And the silence had just been broken. He climbed into the cargo ship, keyed in the coordinates he had not typed in 2 decades, and lifted off. The ship punched through Tannervale's thin atmosphere and into the black. Below him, the red planet grew small. Above him, the galaxy stretched out in all its cold, indifferent glory. And somewhere, 40 light-years away, Dustreach was waiting. It took 6 days to reach the exclusion zone. The Empire had designated a 40 light-year bubble around Dustreach as restricted space. No commercial traffic, no military traffic, no traffic at all. Every star chart listed the region as unstable gravitational anomaly. Do not approach. It was a lie, of course. The real anomaly was not gravitational. But the lie had held for 50 years, and that was all that mattered. On the 7th day, Elias crossed the invisible line. He expected alarms. He expected a patrol ship. He expected the sudden appearance of an Imperial Black Fleet corvette demanding his registration. None of it came. The black space around him was silent, empty. The stars did not move. That was when Elias understood. The Empire was not watching the exclusion zone. They were afraid of it. He pressed on. Dustreach appeared on his sensors 40 hours later, a small, reddish world, orbited by a single dead moon. The planet had once been a thriving mining colony, home to nearly 30,000 humans. It had produced titanium, copper, and a rare isotope called corvellium, used in Empire-grade weapons manufacturing. That was what the official records said. What the records did not say was what else the miners had found, deep in the lower shafts of the main mine. What they had hit, what had responded, and what had happened in the 72 hours that followed. Elias had been there for those 72 hours. He remembered every second. He brought the ship down on the outskirts of the old colony town, in the shadow of a rusted water tower. The engines cut, the dust settled, and Elias Kane, for the first time in 23 years, stepped onto the red soil of Dustreach. The town was exactly as he remembered it. That was the first thing that was wrong. 20 years of wind and weather should have buried half the buildings. The porches should have rotted. The signs should have fallen. But the general store still had its sign up. The jailhouse door was closed. The water pump by the main street was, impossibly, still working. Elias could hear the faint drip of water onto stone. Someone had been maintaining Dustreach for 20 years. He drew the revolver. He walked down the main street, and halfway to the mine entrance, he saw the figure. It was standing in the doorway of the old church. A man, roughly Elias's height, wearing a long coat, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his eyes. He did not move as Elias approached. He did not speak. He simply stood there, waiting. When Elias was 10 paces away, the figure raised his head, and Elias Kane, for the first time since he had buried his partner, looked into the face of Cole Rennick. "You're late," Cole said. His voice was exactly the same. Elias stopped walking. The revolver was still in his hand, still half raised. He did not lower it. "You're dead," Elias said. "I buried you. You buried someone." Cole stepped out of the church doorway and into the light. He looked older than the last time Elias had seen him. Not 20 years older, but older. There were lines around his eyes that had not been there before. A scar across his jaw. His hair had gone white at the temples, but it was him. Elias knew it with the same certainty he knew his own name. "You were dead," Elias said again, because he needed to say it, because saying it was the only way to make the world make sense. I was supposed to be, Cole said. That was the deal. That was what they told you. Did you ever wonder why they let you live, Elias? You saw everything I saw. You were down in the shaft with me. You heard the voice. Why did they scrub the colony and let you walk? Elias did not answer, because he had wondered, for 23 years, every single day. They didn't let me walk, he said. Slowly, they let me live. There's a difference. Cole almost smiled. There is, he said, and I'm going to show you what the difference is. But first, you need to see what's in the mine. Cole, I know what you're thinking, Elias. I know you think this is a trick, that I'm not real, or I'm something wearing his face, or some Empire Black Ops sent to finish the job. I know you're going to point that revolver at me any second now, so I'm going to save you the trouble. Cole reached into his coat. Elias's finger tightened on the trigger, but Cole did not pull out a weapon. He pulled out a photograph. He held it up, turned it so Elias could see. It was the same photograph Elias kept in the wooden box under his bed. The two of them, young, squinting at the sun, standing in front of the mine entrance. But this was not a copy. This was the original. Elias could see the crease down the middle where he had folded it, 23 years ago. He could see the small brown stain in the corner where he had spilled coffee on it one morning. He could see, on the back, in his own handwriting, the words, Dust Reach, Year 12 of the Expansion. Only one person in the galaxy could have had that photograph, and it was not Elias. I kept it, Cole said. All these years, I kept it to remind me why I stayed. Elias lowered the revolver, slowly. What's in the mine, Cole? Cole turned and began walking toward the mine entrance. He did not look back, but his voice carried low and steady across the red dust. Something the Empire is terrified of, he said, and something that has been waiting 20 years for you to come home. The mine entrance was exactly as Elias remembered it, a wide arched opening cut into the side of a low mesa, reinforced with old steel beams. The mouth of the shaft descended at a gentle angle into the dark. The air coming up from below was cool and strange, carrying a faint metallic smell Elias had not smelled in 2 decades. Cole lit a lantern. They descended together. For the first few minutes, neither man spoke. The only sound was the crunch of boots on stone, the soft hiss of the lantern. Elias kept his hand near the revolver, his eyes adjusted slowly to the dark. The walls of the shaft were smooth, polished by decades of dust and wind. Here and there, old equipment lay abandoned. A cart, a drill, a tin cup still sitting on a ledge where some miner had left it 50 years ago. How long has it been talking to you? Elias said finally. Since the day I woke up, Cole said, which is a day I don't remember. I remember the shaft collapsing. I remember the voice. And then I remember opening my eyes and being alone on this rock for 20 years. It kept you alive. It needed me alive. Why? Cole did not answer right away. They walked in silence for another 100 meters. The shaft deepened. The air grew colder. You know how the Empire rewrites its own history, Cole said, eventually. You know how every time a colony fails, every time a ship goes missing, every time something inconvenient happens, the records just change. You wake up one morning and the thing you remember never existed. The Empire has been doing this for 600 years, Elias. 600 years of erasing its own mistakes. I know. Down here, Cole said, is the thing that doesn't let itself be erased. They rounded a bend in the shaft. The tunnel opened into a wide cavern, and there, in the center of that cavern, was the thing Elias had seen exactly once before, 23 years ago, on the worst day of his life. A doorway, not a door, a doorway, a rectangular opening cut into the living rock, its edges too precise to be natural, its surface covered in a script no human had ever written and no alien translator had ever cracked. The doorway was dark, not black, not shadow, dark in the way that nothing in the known universe was supposed to be, as if light itself refused to enter it. And, standing in front of the doorway, just as it had been 23 years ago, was a shape. It was not human. It was not any species Elias had ever seen. It was roughly the size of a man, but its silhouette was wrong. Too many angles, too few edges, and when Elias looked at it directly, his eyes slid off it, as if his brain refused to hold the image. Marshal Kane, the shape said. Its voice was the same voice from the letter, the same voice from the radio Elias did not have. The same voice that had been in his head, he now realized, for 23 years, quietly, patiently waiting. You came. Elias's hand was on the revolver, but he did not draw. What are you? He said. I am the thing the Empire buried, the shape said. I am the reason your colony was erased. I am what your partner has been speaking to for 20 years. And I am the reason you are still alive. Why me? The shape did not move, but somehow Elias felt it turn toward him, even though it had no face. Because 50 years ago, it said, the Empire made a promise it could not keep. It promised the galaxy that humanity was not dangerous, that you were a small, harmless species on a backwater rim, that you could be contained, that you could be ruled. A pause. I am here to tell you that the promise has expired, and I need a human to carry that message home. Elias looked at Cole. Cole looked back. There was something in his partner's eyes now that Elias had not seen before. Not fear, not reverence, but something quieter. A kind of tired resolve, the look of a man who has been asked to carry a weight for a very long time, and who is finally about to set it down. You've known this the whole time, Elias said. I've known part of it, Cole said. Not all. It only speaks in pieces. 20 years of pieces. And you waited. I waited for you. Why? Cole smiled faintly, the first smile Elias had seen on him in 23 years. Because you were the only one who'd believe me, he said. Because you were the only one who would come when I called. And because this thing, whatever it is, it doesn't trust a man who hasn't earned silence the way you have. Elias turned back to the shape. What's the message? The shape was quiet for a long time. Then it said, Tell them the mine is open. Tell them the ones who buried me are coming back. Tell them that in 60 days, every record the Empire has ever rewritten will undo itself. Every erased colony, every silenced witness, every name struck from the registry. Tell them the galaxy is about to remember what humans are and what the Empire did to hide it. Elias stood very still. And what do? He said, after I tell them. You ride, the shape said. Where? Anywhere the Empire isn't, because when the records unlock, they will come for the 2 witnesses who started it all. They will come for the Marshal who buried his partner, and they will come for the partner who was never dead. Elias nodded slowly. He had expected something like this. Not the specifics, but the shape of it. He had known, the moment the badge began to hum in his hand, that he was not being called home to rest. He was being called home to run. And for the first time in 23 years, Elias Kane did not mind. He turned to Cole. How long do we have? He said. Before we leave. Before they find us. Cole looked at the shape. The shape did not move, but somehow the cavern seemed to darken, as if the doorway itself was listening, weighing, deciding. 48 hours, the shape said. Then the first ship arrives. It will not be an Imperial ship. It will be something the Empire built in secret 50 years ago, for exactly this moment. It has been waiting in a shipyard beyond the Veil, and it is already underway. Elias took a long breath. Then he drew the revolver, checked the cylinder one more time, and holstered it. "Cole," he said. "Yeah, they left Dustreach at dawn." Elias flew the cargo ship. Cole sat beside him in the co-pilot's seat, the seat he had sat in 1,000 times before, 23 years ago, when they had been young and the galaxy had been smaller and the Empire had still seemed invincible. Neither man spoke for the first hour of the flight. There was no need. Some silences between old partners are not empty. They are full. As the red planet fell away below them, Elias keyed the long-range comm and began to compose the first message. It would not reach Tannervale. It would not reach any Imperial outpost. It would bounce, instead, off a network of old Marshal relay beacons, beacons the Empire thought it had decommissioned, but which Cole, somehow, had quietly kept alive for 20 years. The message would reach exactly 37 people, retired marshals, old lawmen, the last survivors of a service the Empire had erased from history, men and women who had also, like Elias, chosen silence over the alternative. The message was short. The mine is open. Cole is alive. The Empire is coming. Ride. Elias hit send. The beacon network lit up like a constellation. Somewhere, 37 old marshals on 37 forgotten worlds opened their old wooden boxes, pulled out their old badges, and watched 3 words burn themselves into the metal from the inside out. They found it, and 37 old marshals did what Elias Kane had done the night before. They loaded their guns. The Galactic Empire had 3 rules about Dustreach. For 50 years, those rules had held. For 50 years, the galaxy had moved on, and the mine had stayed buried, and the Empire had slept easy in the belief that silence was the same as peace. But silence, Elias Kane had learned, is never the same as peace. Silence is only the sound of a thing waiting to be heard, and somewhere, deep in the red dust of a forgotten colony at the edge of forgotten space, a doorway was still open, and a message was still traveling, and 37 old men and women were saddling up for one last ride. The Empire had made a promise 50 years ago that humanity was small. It was about to learn what small men with long memories could do.